They've been asleep for 17 years, but they're getting ready for a mad dash to find a mate. Hi there, thanks for joining us for Plain English lesson number 364. How about that as a mystery? Mad dash to find a mate after 17 years. I'm Jeff. JR is the producer, and the full lesson, including the transcript, is available online at plainenglish.com/364. Coming up today, have you heard the expression, a force of nature? The cicadas are a perfect example of a force of nature. These guys have lived underground for 17 years, and they're about to come out from underground for just a few weeks before they die, and there will be trillions of them. Today's lesson is all about brood 10 of the periodic cicadas. The expression is live on, and we have a quote of the week. A passage in the Bible's Old Testament describes how locusts covered the earth and devoured all the fields in Egypt. What's coming in 2021 is not quite on that level, but Americans in 15 states are getting ready for brood 10, a cohort of trillions of loud cicadas that come out just once every 17 years. The cicadas are one of nature's mysteries. These thumb-sized insects spend exactly 17 years silently developing underground, and then they emerge all at the same time. Once they are above ground, they scramble to find a mate, and then they die just as quickly as they arrived on the scene. After just a few weeks, it's all over. A new generation of cicadas is buried in the ground, and the countdown begins again. The life of a cicada goes like this. They hatch from eggs and immediately dive underground. They stay about 8 inches below the surface, living on the sugar from tree roots. After 17 winters, they start to get ready to come to the surface. When the soil temperature starts to warm up, they begin to dig tunnels up toward the surface. When the soil temperature reaches 64 degrees Fahrenheit, they come out from underground. That's when the real action begins. The cicadas then shed their skin and sprout wings. The male cicadas perch high on trees and produce their mating call. Once they mate, the females lay eggs. Both the males and the females die just days later. That's it. That's their whole life above the surface. Almost 17 years underground, all in preparation for a couple of weeks of action. New cicadas hatch from the eggs and then tunnel into the ground, and the cycle repeats. Cicadas live in broods. They are cohorts that all live and die on the same 17-year cycle. Large parts of the eastern United States are home to cicadas, but not every brood is on the same cycle. So In almost any given year, some part of the U.S. will experience cicadas. However, brood 10 is the biggest and most intense, and they are getting ready to come out this year. When they do, they will blanket the areas in which they live. There will be millions per acre in some areas. They will cling to trees and houses. There will be trillions in total. Unlike the locusts that destroyed crops in Egypt in biblical times, and unlike the modern-day locusts that still plague Africa, the cicadas are not harmful either to humans or to crops. The worst they'll do is damage a few trees. But trillions of these cicadas will make an ear-splitting noise 24 hours a day for several weeks. Each male can sound as loud as a lawnmower. For humans in most areas, the sound of the cicadas is like listening to a jackhammer coming from all directions. You can't escape it unless you find a place with no trees. Two people standing next to each other would have to shout to be heard over all the racket. The noise is the mating call. Males, high above the ground, emit the loud sounds as they hope to attract a mate. A cicada is about the size of a human thumb. They have black bodies, bright red eyes, and orange striped wings. Nobody knows how cicadas can count the 17 years in their cycle. Scientists speculate that their emergence is either regulated by hormones or by the nutrients in the trees, but it remains a mystery. Some cicadas are on a 13-year cycle, but the majority are on the longer 17-year cycle. Another mystery is why they all emerge at once. Scientists suspect this gives the cicada an evolutionary advantage. Snakes and birds would be the most natural predators, and some do indeed feast on the cicadas. But the cicadas come out in massive quantities, so even the hungriest predator can't do any real damage to the brood as a whole. Cicadas don't bite, and they present no harm to humans or any other animals. They don't even affect crops. They mostly suck fluid from tree and shrub branches, but even this doesn't harm trees. The only damage they do is to the trees in which they lay eggs. Females have a small built-in saw that they use to dig a ridge into twigs and tree branches. They cut a groove into the branch and deposit their eggs in there. Some trees can be damaged from all the cicadas cutting into their branches at once, so landscapers sometimes cover their trees in netting. Cicadas prefer oak, maple, and fruit trees. They leave the evergreens mostly alone. The parents die before ever seeing their offspring hatch. The eggs hatch into nymphs, which fall to the ground and dig into the soil. The next emergence of brood 10 will come in 2038. I lived in Ohio during the last cicada cycle in the summer of 2004. That was one of the most intense areas for Brood 10. Believe me when I tell you, if you were outside in an area with trees, you would have to shout at someone standing just a few feet away from you. That's while they're alive. The really gross thing is when they die. They fall from the trees. You can be walking down a sidewalk and dead cicadas will just drop from the trees on top of you. They crunch underfoot as you walk. They get in your hair. They get in your clothes. They fall or fly into open car windows. For months, maybe even years, I was finding dead cicadas in the small nooks and crannies of my car. And they're coming out again soon. They won't be where I live now, but I might go to Indiana, the next state over, just to hear them when they're in full force. I'll keep my car windows closed this time. I read a story about a woman who had planned an outdoor wedding ceremony in a well-landscaped area right for the middle of cicada season without knowing it. Talk about bad timing. Today's expression is to live on. It's a phrasal verb that's used to describe how something survives. Live on can be used with either humans or animals. With humans, we usually talk about money. With animals, we usually talk about food sources. Today, we talked about the cicada Brood 10 that's coming to the surface this year. Cicadas spend 17 years below the surface of the earth. Shortly after hatching, they go underground and they stay beneath the surface for 17 years. How do they live beneath the surface of the earth? What do they eat to stay alive? They suck the fluids out of tree roots when they're down there. That's how they get the nutrients they need to stay alive. So we say they live on the fluids from tree roots. You can say live primarily on if you want to talk about what a creature eats the majority of the time. I told you about my vacation to Yellowstone National Park. Before I went, I had to learn a lot about bears, specifically how to protect myself from bears in case I ever saw one. But one thing I learned is that bears live primarily on grasses, berries, roots, and insects. They do sometimes eat fish and small mammals, but they live primarily on things that don't move. So that's animals. You can use this with humans too, usually when talking about a person's diet. College kids can live on ramen noodles and microwave meals. One nutritionist in a famous study decided he would live on just Twinkies, cupcakes, chips, sugary cereals, and cookies for 10 weeks. He did it to prove that you can lose weight by limiting your calories, even if those calories are all junk foods. It wasn't a recommendation. He did it to prove a point. After living on just junk food for 10 weeks, he lost 27 pounds. With humans, though, it's much more common to talk about money and especially an amount of money needed to survive or live. About 1 billion people in the world live on less than $1 per day. That's a common measure of extreme poverty. They live on less than $1 a day. Most places in the U.S. have a minimum wage of about $10 to $15. It's hard for a whole family to live on a minimum wage job. That means it's very hard for a whole family to survive with just a minimum wage job. It's common in many families for two parents to work, but some families have decided they will live on just one income while the other parent stays home. Those families that live on just one salary might have one parent that earns a lot of money, or they might have decided to adjust their budgets so that they can live on just the one income. Today's quote of the week is by the author Celeste Ng. She has written 2 great books, one called Everything I Never Told You, and the other called Little Fires Everywhere. Both great books. So here's the quote. She said, "The things that go unsaid are often the things that eat at you." When something eats at you, it bothers you. So her quote means that the things you choose not to say to another person are the ones that bother you, probably more so than the things you do say. Food for thought today: the things that go unsaid are often the things that eat at you, says the author Celeste Ng. And that's all for today. Congratulations on making it to the end of another Plain English lesson. Remember, the full lesson is available at plainenglish.com/364. And that includes the full transcript, translations, video, fast audio, and more. plainenglish.com/364. And we'll see you right back here on Thursday.